So, since it's December, here's part 1 of our Christmas-themed puppy place read-along. Chapter 1. Eat a lot of pizza. Pepperoni, mushrooms, anchovies on the pizza. Mozzarella cheese and Parmesan too. Good. Charles shouted happily with the group. He loved the pizza chant. He loved his bright yellow t-shirt. He loved working towards his wolf rink. In fact, Charles loved just about everything about being in Cub Scouts. It was so cool that his best friend Sammy was in his den, and it was awesome that both of them would soon become wolves. And Charles thought it was most super duper cool and awesome was that his mom and dad were Akilas. That is den leaders. That means all 6 Cub Scouts that came into Charles' den came to the Petersons' house for their meeting every week. It also meant that both Mom and Dad came along to the Scouts' monthly pack meeting. Charles' dad finished leading the pizza chant. His mom shooed out the pack to the backyard so they could practice for feats of the skill. And they would have to require perform their part of their wolf badge requirements. Some of the den members were having a very hard time sitting still for very long. Though there was always time for running and jumping during their meetings. Charles and Sammy were practicing their forward and backwards rolls when Charles looked up and saw a furry brown face watching him from a window in the house. "Hi, Buddy!" he yelled, waving to his puppy. Charles loved Buddy so much, even more than ice cream, and then more than Cub Scouts, and even more than Christmas, which was only a few weeks away. Buddy was brown with a white heart-shaped patch on his chest. He was the cutest, smartest, funniest, softest, sweetest, prettiest puppy ever. And best of all, he belonged to the Petersons forever and ever. Lots of puppies had come and gone since the Petersons had started being a foster family. That meant they took care of puppies who needed homes. Usually, each puppy only stayed for a few weeks till the Petersons found him or her a forever home. But Buddy was different. Buddy had to stay. Had come to stay. Now, in the upstairs window, another little face popped up next to Buddy's. That was the Bean, Charles' little brother. His real name was Adam, but nobody ever called him that. The Bean had a fuzzy green turtle hanging from his mouth. Mr. Turtle came from the pet store and he had a squeaker inside. He was really a toy for dogs, not little boys. But the Bean was not exactly your regular little boy. The Bean loved to pretend he was a dog. When I was a little girl, I loved to pretend I was a dog. Anyways, back to the story. Then a fur face popped up. It was Lizzie, Charles' older sister. She was keeping an eye on Buddy and the Bean like the den had its meeting. Charles probably figured that Lizzie was probably a little jealous of all the special time he got with Mom and Dad during Scout meetings, and all the fun things that the Scouts got to do, like the crafts, skits, and games. Sure enough, Lizzie stuck her tongue out at Charles. He stuck his back out at her. Lizzie put her pinkies into the corners of her mouth and pulled it into a jack-o'-lantern shape. Charles did the same back at her. Charles was thinking about trying a new face, crossed eyes, and a dangling tongue, but soon he heard Mom's voice. "Okay, Scouts, let's head inside." Mom was by the back door, waving her arms. "Our visitor has arrived, and now it's time to sit down and put in our listening ears." The den often had special visitors. Most of the time they talked about how their jobs were or how the scouts could make a difference in the community. Last month, the chief of the police come. He made all the scouts official deputies. That was cool. Back in the living room, Dad was standing next to the Christmas tree, talking to a tall man with a big round stomach. Dad must have said something funny because just as Charles and others came in, the man burst into a loud, happy laugh. Dad was laughing too. Both men got onto more serious once the scouts had settled down and were sitting in a circle. Boys, this is Mr. Baker, Dad said, introducing the man. He is the director of the Nest, which is a shelter for families who need temporary homes. You mean like the way we take care of puppies? Asked Charles. Dad nodded. Sort of. Does everybody remember that big fire that burst out on to Pinewood Apartments last week? Charles nodded along the other boys. Boy, howdy, he sure did remember. He remembered. Dad's beeper was going off in the middle of dinner. Dad was a fireman, and he was always ready to go in case of an emergency. He would have to leave right away to help with the Pinewood fire, and it kept him busy until very late that night. Fortunately, nobody was hurt by that fire, Mr. Baker said. But 3 families had lost their homes, so they're staying with us at the Nest. We have other 2 families staying there. 2 families that need a little help. With 5 families, we're full to the brim. Sammy raised his hand. Hey, how long did the people usually stay? Usually only for a month or 2, he answered Mr. Baker, until they get back up on their feet. Sometimes a mom or dad needs some help with finding a job or learning English if they are from another country. We can help with that. We can also make sure we help the kids with their homework and make sure they get to school every day. Another scout spoke up. Do the families help out at the Nest, Mr. Baker? They sure do, said Mr. Baker. We all work together to keep the Nest going, just like all you help out chores at home. In return, the families get a beautiful, safe, warm place to live and free meals a day until they can find new homes. Mom spoke up. Free, delicious meals, she said. I once had dinner there once when I was writing an article about the Nest. Charles' mom was a reporter for the Littleton News, the local newspaper. We do have a good cook, chuckled Mr. Baker. And I must admit, I enjoy helping out the kitchen. I wonder if you boys can guess what kinds of things I like to make. I'll give you a hint. My name says it all. Oh, Charles got the hint. Cookies, he yelled. Cake, yelled Sammy. That's right, I'm a baker. Said Mr. Baker. So when you come to the Nest next week, you can sample some of my treats. Dad spoke up again. Remember how we agreed we would help at our last meeting? We wanted to volunteer somewhere to help others at the community. Mr. Baker has invited us to help serve dinner at the Nest one week for next month. We'll even be there for Christmas Eve. Mr. Baker was nodding and smiling. We can't wait to have you, he said. Especially on Christmas Eve. That's when we do our annual showcase. singing and dancing and all that stuff. And our volunteers are the stars of the show. Charles gulped. Working at the desk sounded like fun. It would be great to help people on Christmas Eve, but not performing in front of people. But performing in front of people was not his idea of a good time. Just the fun of it made his hands feel hot and sweaty. But there wasn't any time to worry about that now. It was now time to say goodbye to Mr. Baker and finish their meeting up with a song. Mom turned on all the lights, except for the ones out on the Christmas tree. Then Charles and the other cat sang, "Show Aquila we stand tall, we are Cub Scouts after all," to the tune of It's a Small World After All. Singing was fun. As long as it wasn't for an audience. They were out in the last verse when Charles heard the phone ring. A moment later, Lizzie rushed into the room. "Miss Dobbins just called," she said to Mom. "She wants us to come over right away. She says she needs a foster family tonight." Mrs. Dobbins was the director of Caring Paws. The animal shelter where Lizzie volunteered one day a week. Mrs. Dobbins and her staff took care of lots of cute dogs and cats, but sometimes they needed help, and that's where the Petersons came in. As soon as the last Cub Scout had been picked up by his parents, the Petersons piled into their band and headed for Caring Paws. They soon arrived at the animal door. Mrs. Dobbins greeted them at the door. Without wasting any time, she led them into the building and down the hall. Charles thought they were going into the dog room. Instead, and she brought him into her office. There in the corner was an enormous cardboard box. It was wrapped in bright green and shiny paper, and a big floppy red bow hung down one side. "Look what just arrived," said Mrs. Dobbins. "I was working late one night, and I didn't even hear a car pull up. But when I went forward to lock the door, I found this box on the steps." Charles, Lizzie, and the Bean moved closer to the box and peeked inside. Their parents were right in front of them. Charles caught a glimpse of a wide, shaggy, white and brown face with big eyes that looked like melted chocolate looking up at him. A puppy! A puppy with floppy brown ears and long, feathery tail, and the biggest paws Charles had ever seen. "Wow!" Dad said, staring into the box. "That is one huge puppy." "Aww," said Lizzie. "How cute! Is she a St. Bernard?" "Uppy!" whispered the Bean, who had to stand on his tippy toes to look into the box. "Keep looking," said Mrs. Dobbins. "Oh my!" Mom said suddenly. "There's a little kitten in here too."